In 1904, a group of firefighters hop on their wagon and rush to Manhattan's Adventurers Society building. As they go upstairs, they hear people screaming inside the meeting room. One man tries opening the door, but his hand gets frozen before his fellow firefighters save him and barge into the room. Much to their surprise, the room is completely frozen, along with all the people in it. The firefighters are looking around the room when they find a recorder playing and a mysterious person in ancient brass armor holding an ancient orb. As soon as one of the firefighters touches the orb, the mystery person snaps awake, startling them, and all hell breaks loose afterward. In the modern day, the Ghostbusters are hard at work when a ghost pops out of a sewer drain and passes by their car. The 15-year-old girl named Phoebe recognizes it as the house kitchen sewer dragon, so she decides to go out to bust it. However, Phoebe's mother, Callie, tells her not to do that, but Phoebe ignores her, saying she has a ghost to bust. She then extends her seat outward and shoots at the ghost. Phoebe's 18-year-old brother, Trevor, sends a remote-controlled vehicle to catch the dragon, but he fails as the dragon flies away from the vehicle's range. Callie then releases a drone and finally busts the dragon. Just as it seems it's all over, Callie's boyfriend named Gary is about to crash while driving. That forces him to swerve and knock over a line of bicycles. Thankfully, everybody is okay and nobody is hurt. However, Mayor Walter, the Ghostbusters' most bitter enemy, is not happy about what they do. He tells them all for causing lots of damage in the city. He also reminds them it's illegal to have a 15-year-old minor like Phoebe do the dangerous job of hunting ghosts. For this reason, Walter orders Gary to keep her out of the Ghostbusters crew. Gary tries to talk the mayor out of it, but Walter is not convinced and holds the Ghostbusters responsible for the damages done to the city while they were chasing the ghost. That's why he threatens to end the Ghostbusters for good if they ever cause more damage or do anything slightly illegal. The crew then go home and get on with their lives, but Phoebe is upset. Because of the mayor's threat, Callie won't allow her to do any ghost hunting again. Phoebe tries changing her mother's mind, telling her that being a Ghostbuster is her true calling, but Callie remains adamant and says no. Following this, Gary and Callie are chatting when they find the containment unit where the ghosts are locked, shaking after locking the last ghost they've busted in. That is because it's been filled with ghosts since 1984, and there's little room left for newly captured ghosts. To make sure the locked-up ghosts won't break out, the two pull down the lever, and after a struggle, they finally manage to do so. The light then turns from red to green, which means the unit is clean and the ghosts are tightly locked in. Meanwhile, a former Ghostbuster named Ray works at an antique shop with his intern Podcast. Their job is to look at old objects and check if they're haunted. A guy named Nadim stops by and has Ray look at some ancient objects. One of those objects is the ancient orb, which Nadim offers to sell for $50. Looking closely at the orb, Ray finds it to be quite unique and recognizes it as an object to lock up ghosts and evil spirits. With his psychokinetic energy meter, Ray is checking the orb for paranormal activity when suddenly the meter starts beeping and frying. The store starts shaking before a mysterious energy is secretly released from the orb. This energy roams the city and damages the Ghostbusters containment unit. The shaking stops shortly after and everything is normal again. However, Ray and Nadim are terrified of the orb. Ray unwittingly pays $100 for it, and horrified Nadim hurriedly leaves the store, saying he doesn't have change. During this time, Gary looks at the damaged containment unit and thinks the place shook because of it. For this reason, he consults a lady named Janine, who used to be the Ghostbusters receptionist back in 1984. Janine says she'll run this by the former Ghostbuster Winston Zeddemore and his engineers. Following this, Trevor is relaxing in his room when he notices a thick liquid from the ceiling. This leads him to conclude there's a ghost in the attic. That's why he arms himself with a proton pack and goes to the attic to bust the ghost. Trevor finds a pile of garbage when suddenly a Slimer underneath freaks out and escapes, leaving a frustrated Trevor with the sticky liquid all over his face. At night, the Ghostbusters are called to duty to bust a ghost. Phoebe suits up and decides to tag along, but Callie reminds her she's not allowed to go and tells her to stay. As the rest of the crew leaves, an upset Phoebe remains behind. To get over her frustration, Phoebe goes to a peaceful park where she can play some chess. She was just getting ready to play all on her own when suddenly the chess pieces on the other side of the table start moving on their own. Surprisingly enough, Phoebe doesn't get spooked and recognizes this as the doing of a ghost, so she just plays along. The ghost then reveals herself to Phoebe, introducing herself as Melody, and she's amazed that Phoebe is not scared of her at all. As the two play and chat, they hit it off and have fun playing. Eventually, Melody beats Phoebe in the game and disappears. The next day, an engineer working for Winston named Lars stops by to check the containment unit and concludes that it is super stuffed with ghosts. There's a risk they might break out. For this reason, the former Ghostbuster Winston Zeddemore himself stops by afterward to tell them about a solution to this problem. That's why Winston then takes the crew to his research center, where he shows them a much bigger containment unit that has room for a much bigger number of ghosts. Ray then hands over the haunted ancient orb to Winston's other engineer, Lucky, to have the energy extracted from it. Ray then introduces the crew to the ghosts locked in the center. One of those ghosts is an invisible possessor who can control the objects around it. Later that day, Gary tries to have a heart-to-heart talk with the upset Phoebe to console her. He tells her time flies by and she'll turn 18 in no time. But as he tries to sound relatable, the conversation takes an awkward turn. Fortunately, the conversation is interrupted when the Ghostbusters are called to duty. Once again, the crew leaves and Phoebe is home alone when someone calls the Ghostbusters about a ghost. Behind her mother's back, Phoebe decides to go and gears up along with her friend Podcast for the job. Meanwhile, Lars and Lucky are working to extract the energy from the ancient orb, but their try fails as the huge energy in the orb shuts down the power. Luckily enough, Lars fixes the power in time and decides to take the orb out of the machine. As soon as he touches it, Lars' hand is frozen, causing him to immediately drop it. During this time, Podcast and Phoebe arrive at the diner who called them about the ghost. After the waitress points them to the ghost, Phoebe is about to bust it when she realizes the ghost is her best friend, Melody. Phoebe is reluctant to blast her, but Podcast urges her to do so. However, Melody disappears just before Phoebe shoots and ends up damaging the diner. Following this, Phoebe is home hiding her proton pack under her bed when Melody shows up just outside her window. After Phoebe says sorry for almost shooting her, Melody brushes it off. Phoebe then invites her inside afterward and shows her around the house. As Phoebe shows her the containment unit, the two bond, but they are interrupted when Callie calls for Phoebe to come up. The day after, Trevor is trying to catch the Slimer who loves eating. He baits him with a trail of Cheetos and waits for him to come out. Trevor's plan works as the Slimer comes out and starts eating the Cheetos. But before Trevor can bust it, the building starts mysteriously shaking. That distracts Trevor, allowing the Slimer to get away once again. The crew goes downstairs to find the wall behind the containment unit destroyed and the containment unit frozen. The crew is shocked. They can't understand how this happened in the first place. Trevor goes to consult Lars and Lucky, who've been experimenting on the orb. He learns the energy in the orb is so powerful that it can affect the other locked-up ghosts. Even more surprising, it allows the possessor to secretly escape and hide in Podcast's bag, unbeknownst to him and the others. The power of the orb intrigues Trevor. He decides to talk to the guy who sold it. Along with Lucky and Lars, Trevor visits Nadim. From him, the three learn that Nadim's late grandmother left him the ancient orb along with other artifacts, all of which Nadim stores in a secret brass chamber. Walking into this chamber, the three are amazed at how magnificent the other artifacts are. One of those artifacts is two big horns. There's also the brass armor along with many others. With her psychokinetic meter, Lucky checks if the chamber is haunted. Surprisingly, the meter starts beeping when Lucky places it near Nadim. For this reason, she has the former Ghostbuster, Peter Venkman, interview him to test if he's possessed by a ghost. As Peter provokes Nadim, he is surprised to learn that Nadim has special powers. Through his subconscious, Nadim can control the fire near him. Meanwhile, Phoebe decides to look more into the orb. Along with Ray and Podcast, she goes to the New York Library on a sidecar motorcycle. There, the three meet the librarian, Dr. Hubert, who explains the history behind the ancient orb. To their surprise, the three learn about a horned phantom god named Garaka. His two big horns are the source of his power, and he has the ability to freeze anything he wants. With his power, he tried to rule the world, but eventually, some people called the Fire Masters stopped him. With their power to wield fire, the Fire Masters trapped Garaka inside a small orb. Those Fire Masters are Nadim's ancestors, and his grandmother inherited the ancient orb from them. The same ancient orb Nadim sold for $50. Dr. Hubert then plays an old recording from back in 1904 when the people in the Adventurers Society building got frozen. As the three are listening, the possessor steals the wax cylinder from the recorder before it jumps into a garbage bag and runs away. The three give chase, but they fail to catch it. The frustrated Ray and Hubert are walking out of the library when they find the bag and cylinder under a huge lion statue, much to their relief. However, the statue itself comes to life after the possessor gets inside it. Just as it's about to attack Ray, Phoebe saves him in time and blasts the statue to small pieces, causing lots of damage in the process. Now Phoebe is in trouble. She ends up in the police station, where Mayor Walter visits and happily tells the Ghostbusters that they're done. Phoebe talks back to the mayor, but Walter warns her to keep her mouth shut. Phoebe doesn't obey and gets arrested for it. Fortunately, Callie and Gary bail her out and scold her for not listening to them and hunting ghosts behind their backs. Phoebe is upset and storms out. Following this, the Ghostbusters go to their place only to find the police have shut it down. Much to their disappointment, they also find the police took their equipment. This disheartens them, so they pack their stuff, preparing to leave. Gary tries to tell the upset Callie have some hope. He reminds her that they are Ghostbusters and that everybody needs them. Callie is not interested in hearing it and tells Gary to get out. During this time, Lars is checking the frozen containment unit in the basement when Nadim comes to take a look and wonders what happened to it. Ray chimes in and reveals to Nadim the truth about his ancestors. He confronts him for selling the orb for just $50 and tells him that he's a fire master. Nadim laughs it off, thinking this is absurd. Ray flicks a lighter and tells Nadim to light the candle with it without touching it. Again, Nadim is laughing it off when the fire starts moving in the same direction as his hand waves. Nadim is awestruck by his newfound power and starts practicing to light the candle. Meanwhile, Gary tries to talk heart-to-heart with the upset Phoebe, reassuring her she'll get over this and move on to make more friends. However, Gary doesn't know that Phoebe has already left and is having a walk with Melody. As Phoebe bonds with Melody, talking about the universe and its dimensions, she decides to temporarily turn to a ghost to see what it feels like. That's why the two secretly go to Winston's research center, where Phoebe sits inside the separator machine to have her spirit separated from her body for only 2 minutes. After the separator is activated, Phoebe turns into a ghost afterward. She approaches Melody and has a moment with her, but then Melody tearfully says sorry to her for using her. Suddenly, Garaka possesses Phoebe's spirit and has her say the secret spell to unlock the orb and set him free. Just then, Phoebe regains control of her spirit and meets Garaka himself, who vows to rule the world. The 2 minutes are up and Phoebe's spirit returns to her body, while Garaka is now free. Lucky barges in and attacks Garaka, but she runs out of luck when Garaka freezes her hands and destroys her weapon before he leaves. The distraught Gary and Callie rush to the center and check on Phoebe. They're also surprised to learn about Garaka's escape from the orb. During this time, at a smoke shop called the Fire Master, the owner is minding his own business when Garaka walks in and asks him if he's the Fire Master. As the owner says yes, Garaka freezes him on the spot. Shortly after, Garaka breaks into Nadim's apartment to retrieve his horns and get his powers back, preparing to rule the earth. The people of New York are having a normal day when suddenly a big wave of smoke looms over the city. Not only that, but the temperature goes down. Clearly, Garaka's attack will be soon, and New York is about to turn to another Antarctica. The Ghostbusters assemble in their place to talk about Garaka's attack. They get worried when Ray figures Garaka is coming for their containment unit. He wants to free all the ghosts caught since the 80s and use them to rule the world. Luckily enough, Winston's engineers bring all of the weapons they got from the research center. Phoebe decides to melt some brass objects and load them into her proton pack. After all, brass and fire are Garaka's weaknesses. Meanwhile, everybody else gears up, including the retired Ghostbusters like Janine and Ray. Winston also comes and decides to tag along. At this point, the weather is getting colder by the minute and New York is covered in smoke. Someone knocks on the door. Thinking it is Garaka, Winston cautiously opens up, but it's just Peter in his Ghostbuster uniform. He too decides to join the battle, making a great reunion with his fellow retired Ghostbusters. At the roof, Lucky and Trevor spot a tricycle rolling on its own. Ray and Winston recognize this as the Possessor and order the two to get down. While Nadim is practicing his power to wield fire, the Possessor sneaks inside the Ghostbusters' place. It turns on their car and tries running them over, but it fails. The Possessor then sneaks to the upper floor and attacks Lucky. It then takes her weapon and is about to blast Trevor, but Nadim saves him in time after he mastered his true power to wield fire. Podcast then destroys Lucky's proton pack, stopping the Possessor from shooting. The Possessor possesses pizza and tries to escape before the Slimer catches the pizza and gobbles it up along with the Possessor, killing it. At this point, the temperature goes below zero and New York is officially another Antarctica as everything in it turns to ice. At this time, Phoebe confronts Melody in the basement for using her to free Garaka. Melody wanted Garaka free because he could reunite her with her dead family in the afterlife. Despite that, Phoebe decides to forgive Melody and tells her it's never too late to do the right thing. However, it is too late by now as Garaka has just arrived. He storms the place and cracks the ground. Led by Peter, all the Ghostbusters attack Garaka in one go, but it's futile as Garaka easily counters the attack, shocking them. Just then, Nadim comes down in the ancient brass armor. He takes out the lighter to attack Garaka with its fire, but the lighter doesn't ignite. Its fluid has run out, which disappoints the gang. Nadim asks if anybody has a lighter, but unfortunately, nobody has one. Garaka shatters the lighter to pieces and attacks, backing the Ghostbusters into a corner and freeing an army of ghosts from the containment unit to rule the city. Now all of the Ghostbusters are frozen except for Phoebe, who wasn't with them. With the brass she loaded her pack with, she shoots at Garaka, but Garaka easily freezes her. Before he can take her soul out, Melody has a change of heart and lights a match. The fire causes Nadim to unfreeze and catch it. With it, he attacks Garaka and unfreezes the Ghostbusters in the process. While Nadim ties it up with the fire, Phoebe immediately attacks Garaka with the brass along with her family, who help her steady her aim. Podcast sends the drone to trap Garaka inside it, but Garaka destroys it with ease. Seeing that, Peter says they'll need a bigger trap. Just then, an idea comes to Ray's mind. He turns the containment unit into a bigger trap and tries to pull down the lever, but he struggles to do so. The original Ghostbusters crew all unite to pull down the rusty lever while reminiscing about their golden years as Ghostbusters. Finally, they succeed in doing so, and Garaka is sucked back into the containment unit for good, never to return again. In the aftermath, Janine notices the light is green, and when it is, the whole world is clean. The original crew celebrates their success, while the rest sigh in relief now that this traumatic experience is over. Phoebe talks to Melody and thanks her. Melody gives Phoebe the match she used to save everybody and bids her farewell before she fades away. Phoebe then gives Callie and Gary a warm hug, realizing how much she loves them. The temperature goes back to normal, and all of the New Yorkers hail the Ghostbusters as the heroes who saved them from being permanently frozen. While the crowd is cheering for them, Mayor Walter arrives to have them sent to jail for good for hunting ghosts against his orders, but Peter Venkman interrupts and calls the mayor a clown for not understanding who saved him in the first place. A reporter catches the mayor off guard and asks him how he feels about the Ghostbusters saving him. At first, Walter is lost for words. Winston chimes in and reminds the mayor that without Phoebe and her family, the whole city would be 3 feet under the ice. The embarrassed mayor then has a change of heart and claps along with everybody. Everybody then cheers up for the Ghostbusters, looking up to them as celebrities. Phoebe and her family are being interviewed when they see the house kitchen sewer dragon and Slimer freely flying. Gary orders the crew to prepare to chase them, and Phoebe calls him Dad, surprising him. Callie lets Trevor drive, and the crew is back on the clock to chase the ghosts. Much later, a bearded truck driver is trying to buy something from the vending machine when a group of small marshmallow men drive his truck away. Furious, he runs after it, shouting that this is his truck.